Baruchim Avon B'Shem Hashem B'Shem Eating Shir. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Harav Yakov Smith Shlit on דיני, Yaleh, Veyavo B'Tfilas erevRoshChodesh. I have the great chus of sponsoring a shir called Egan Shir 718-851-8651. Email ist@yeshivanet.com. Harav Smith.
We once had a shayla. Someone forgot Yaleh Veyavo on a Chodesh, Shacharis or Mincha, and he remembered when he was holding after Modim, so he decided he put it in after Modim, like we put Alanisim in by Chanukah and Purim, and he wanted to know, and he davened, and he finished. Does he have to daven over? A very serious question. 19 brachas. Then we had a shayla. I think it was last year, Rosh Chodesh year, like it's going to be Mitzvah Wednesday. Someone remembers he definitely said Yaleh Veyavo, but he's not sure if he said B'yom Rosh Chodesh Hazeh like he's supposed to, or maybe he said Chag HaMatzos because he was used to that from the 8 days of Pesach. So these are the atypical questions, but there are a number of questions that I want to talk about today. Be'ez Hashem, the shayla of Yaleh Veyavo, when you forgot, when you're allowed, when you have to repeat, halachos for Maariv, and the host of other questions. We'll talk about the early Shabbos and Yaleh Veyavo and Rosh Chodesh. A few weeks ago we spoke about the Yom Tov of Rosh Chodesh. Today we're going to focus, Be'ez Hashem, on the halachos of Yaleh Veyavo in Shemona. Benching is a different sugya. I should mention each shayla is a serious shayla, because if you daven over and you're not supposed to, it's 19 brachos levatolah. If you don't daven over and you weren't yoytza, so then some uvis la yuchal liskain. So the emphasis is that the makar of Yaleh Veyavo in davening is a Mishnah, is a Gemara in Shabbos Chav Daled. The Gemara says days that there is a Mussaf, for example, Rosh Chodesh and Chol HaMoed, Arvis, Shacharis, Umincha, you say Yaleh Veyavo in Shemona. Ba'avoida. We'll soon see avoid, of course, means in the bracha of Ritzei. Im lo yama maxir naisei. If you didn't say Yaleh Veyavo, you have to repeat. That's a chiddush, because we know that Maariv of Rosh Chodesh you don't repeat, but maybe the Maariv is talking about generally, and don't forget Chol HaMoed, we repeat even if you let Yaleh Veyavo and Maariv. Why is it put in avoida? Why not in the same place like Alanisim? The answer is very pashut, because Alanisim is Haidah. Haidah goes in Haidah, which is the end of Modim. But as the Gemara says, Yaleh Veyavo is avoid, is a tefillah. And I must mention it, what kind of precious tefillah it is. You know, today we have a Klal Yisrael because of one word. Hashem pakad esara. The Bereshit had a pekida for Sarah. Once there was a pekida, a split second of the Bereshit's pekida, there's a child. And the whole Yaleh Veyavo is the word paked, yizocher, zichreineinu, figdoineinu. And there's a whole cheshbon how many tefillahs we have, different words in the Yaleh Veyavo. It's an incredible tefillah. That's why Yaleh Veyavo is fundamentally different than Alanisim. Alanisim is a haidah, and Yaleh Veyavo is a very, very meaningful tefillah. Rashi and Tosis on that Gemara and the Mordechai in the back, also on this Gemara, it's in Siman Reishai and Vav, all explain. It's put into avoida because a lot of it also has to do with davening for Yushalayim, davening for Klal Yisrael, which is really the aside of the bracha of avoida. So now we know why it's there. We don't yet see the halachos if you forgot, when do you go back? But that's a different sugya, and that's in brachas Chavtes and Bebeis. Tov lo hisker Rosh Chodesh ba'avoida. If he didn't say it in avoida and he remembered in avoida, he didn't yet start modim, choyzel avoida. Interesting lashon, you go back to avoida. We'll soon see what that means. If you remembered in haidah, in the middle of modim, you didn't see Yaleh Veyavo, go back to avoida. You can't put it into haidah. You remembered in Sim Shalom, go back to avoida. Im Sayim, if you completed the entire Shemona, I forgot to Yaleh Veyavo, choyzel Rosh. Okay. Now we're going to go in order to try to apply this. First of all, let me tell you that if a person left a Yaleh Veyavo, to quote the Ra'ah on our in Maariv brachas, Ke'ilu lo yispalel klal. It's not pshat he davened nicely, but he missed. Or the famous Rabbeinu Yoin in brachas Chavav, the famous sugya of the Chacham in Provantia, But the Benayoni's lashon is, if someone left at Yaleh v'Yavai, Kimishla Yispalel Klal Daininon. He wasn't Yaitza. It's as if he didn't daven. Now, is the pshat didn't that the brachas levatol, he didn't daven by Nessor or Miz Haskara? That's a different shmooze. But all agree, if he didn't say Yaleh v'Yavai, he must repeat the Shmai Nesra, no questions asked. What we also see from a Beferish Gemara, you can't stick it in any place you want. Hiske b'hayda, you remember the middle of Moudim? Go back to Ritzei and repeat Ritzei again, even though Ritzei is a bracha. What's the pshat? Very pashit. Avoida belongs in Avoida. You can't stick Avoida into Hayda. Question, which is interesting and important. If someone remembered by the word Sechzena Einenu, oi, I didn't say Yaleh v'Yavai, what should he do? Charetz Pashit. Stop, say Yaleh v'Yavai, say V'Sechzena, and go weiter. But to my knowledge, there's no reason to say Ritzei a second time. Because the Ritzei wasn't puzzle. If he was holding a middle of Haidah, so the Ritzei was puzzle. So you have to repeat it, even though you're saying Hashem Elokeinu. But if he's holding a middle of Avodah, so why repeat the Ritzei? Now it bothers me. I didn't find the teretz, even though I did see that Tzlach seems to say differently. But the Mar's Lashon is Tab Avodah Chayzel Avodah. What does that mean, Chayzel Avodah? So it must be Avodah means B'Sechazena, but not Ritzei. You look in the Tzlach, in the Daf Chavtes, he seems to say you should have to say Ritzei again, but it's not quoted in any of the Paiskim. So here we have one Klarkite, if you remember in the middle of Avodah, the way the Shulchan Aruch words it, Chayza, then you go back to Avodah, which means you go back to Yaleh v'Yavai, and then you say V'Sechazena. Now let's apply this more specifically. First of all, we should appreciate the words. It's kedai to see the words. Chaim Kanievsky pointed out that Rosh Chodesh is an incredible time of zechir by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For him to remember us, those pekidas, those moments that changed our lives. How does he know that Rosh Chodesh is the day of zechira? It's a Perish Pasuk. V'yam smechaschem, v'yadechem, v'yachachechem, v'yu zikaron l'fnei Hashem Elokeichem. So it's a very opportune time, a very conducive time to daven. And again, a split second of a zechira or pekida makes all the difference. That's why the Paiskim explain that we should make sure not to forget Yaleh v'Yavai. If need be, make reminders, put something in your siddur, put a post-it, put a flag, put your pen, put your tissue, something by Yaleh v'Yavai to remind you. Because as the Kaf HaChaim, Chaim Falaji, Lamed Gimel points out very bluntly, we come to the Rebbeinu Shalom, please remember us on Rosh Chodesh. And you just forgot Yaleh v'Yavai. You can't remember Yaleh v'Yavai, you want the Rebbeinu Shalom to remember you? And this is probably the Hezbollah, what the Kaf HaChaim Soifa, that is Tav Chav Beis Yotes, quotes the Ariyah Kodesh, if someone forgot Yaleh v'Yavai on Rosh Chodesh, it's not a good siman. I don't want to say what it is, but it's not a good siman. Because this is what you need. You need this zechira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and you can't forget. And also I should mention Kaf HaChaim Kuf Yudal Nun Dalid. He says if you put in some type of reminder, you put in again something in your siddur, you put in a tissue or whatever, just to remind you, and then you have a suffix if you said Yaleh v'Yavai, could be you could be saimach that you did, because you made some type of action, you did something, you were proactive to remember. Okay. Question. What's klar is, and people make a mistake, but it's wrong, if a person forgets Yaleh v'Yavai by Maariv, even though, as we'll see, you don't have to repeat the Shmai Nesra, but it's not a good siman. The biggest raya is, a whole kamak could be a whole sugya for itself. The Shulchan Aruch in Reish Lamed Vav, Siv Beis, says, by Maariv also, like Shacharis, you have to have a smichas gula tefillah. You go from Birchas Krishma right into Shmai Nesra. You don't break with anything. Now, we'd rather a little more makel. If you don't have another minion, you'll add a davar Shmai Nesra first. But Maariv also needs smichas gula tefillah. But the Mechaber then quotes a Rashba in Chelik Aleph Reish Sadekei, but you're allowed to announce, Tuesday night and Wednesday night will be Rosh Chodesh Iyar, you're allowed to announce Yaleh v'Yavai. Actually, the Rashba's Lashon, you're allowed to announce the word Rosh Chodesh. They didn't announce Yaleh, they announced Chodesh. And the Chayim explain to remind us it's a Yom Tiv and remind the woman not to malacha. Whatever the case is, you're allowed to announce, talk between Gula Tefillah and say a reminder, whether it's Yaleh Veyavo or Rosh Chodesh. Now this is a plea, because you're making a Vadai Hefsik ben Gula Tefillah to avoid a suffix I might forget. And if he forgets, it's not the end of the world. It's not Maariv. The teretz is, we see clear as day, that even by Maariv, we must remember and not forget Yaleh Veyavo. Now the emphasis is, we could probably spend 20 minutes just about the sugya of this Rashba. It's a plea, I mean, how much it is in every vart of Torah. Maariv says the minig was the first day they announced the word Rosh Chodesh. The second day they announced, the first day they announced Yaleh Veyavo, like we do. The second day they announced Rosh Chodesh. What's the cheshbon? So it's beautiful, because Rosh Chodesh is first begins the second day. Another interesting minig, that Lamaisa today we become very frum, and we don't, typically you don't hear the word announcing Yaleh Veyavo. What do? We bang on the stender, okay, and Ach Shadara. The emphasis in the Rashba, his lashon is Ein Roya Limchais Biyadam. It's not so bad, let them do it. That's why maybe people are reluctant. The Matamoish and Kuf Yutes, as the Bach both quote their Great Rebbe, the Marshal, who had Rayas Brewers, that you're not allowed to be mafsik. It's a hefsik. Why should you do it? Especially Efsekayim Shneim. Lamaisa the Mr. Brewer by us in Hilchas Rosh Chodesh Tov Chav Beis quotes the Shulchan Aruch that says you're allowed to be mafsik, even though he says it in Reish Lamed Vav, but he made sure to put it in Hilchas Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so each shul does what their minig is. I should mention both the Chazon Ish and Rebbe Zalman felt it's a lack of kavod hashchina that a person in the middle of his Shmeinesra says Yaleh Veyavo, even though he's holding there, because you're davening. Okay, Reb Chaim Kanievsky said it's not ma'akiv, and that's why people do it. Maybe it's better than announcing. But what interesting thing is that I saw the Sefer Hilchas Chag B'Chag. He's an old Yerushalayim. He says the minig in Yerushalayim was that when they finished Gal Yisrael, the Chazan said it with a Yom Tov Niggin. Or by Maariv, when he finished Kaddish, he would say it with a Yom Tov Niggin. Or Mincha, he would say Kaddish with a Yom Tov Niggin. That's a good reminder. Now, if you do that today by Mincha, Yom Tov Niggin, they'll think you're a Chayfetz Chashud, they'll carry him away. But it's interesting minig. It avoids problems of hefsik, it's respectful, and you're not mafsik. Also, three more points I wanted to mention. The Ramah, Kuf Yud Aleph, points out, and that's really Magen Avraham as well, that even if you're allowed to announce by Maariv, but you can't announce by Shacharis, because by Shacharis, Smichas Gul Tefillah is more chamer. Also, the Magen Avraham and Reish Lamed Vav and Mr. Bura there both point out, if the Gabbai is behind, he's in the middle of Birchas Krishma, he can't announce Yaleh Veyavo by Maariv. Why? The only etta is between Gula Tefillah, because it's a little less of an hefsik. Also, I would mention, when we start saying V'sein Talamat Levracha, it's kedai to announce V'sein Talamat Levracha. Someone once asked me on a regular night, he just davened Maariv, and he said Yaleh Veyavo. I said, why'd you do that? He said, well, the truth is the Gabbai clapped by Maariv. I didn't know what he meant, so I thought it was Rosh Chodesh, even though Rosh Chodesh was last week. So he said Yaleh Veyavo. He didn't chap, the Gabbai meant Saint Talamat Levracha. So I would advise that then it's taka likuva, you have to say why, and also when we start saying the same bracha, the first night of Chol HaMoed. But the point is that clapping or not, the ik is to remember. It's beside me to understand why by mincha we don't make an announcement. You can't lose. There's no problem. But anyhow, lamaisa, if he did forget and he did leave out Yaleh Veyavo, now what? So the emphasis is Pashtus, the Gemara's lashon is Shacharis, Mincha, Maariv. You have to repeat. You have to go back. But as we know, the Shulchan Aruch and Tov Chav Beis Aleph, based on a third sugya in Brachas Lamed Amid Beis, that our minig is that if you left out Yaleh Veyavo, Maariv of Rosh Chodesh, you don't repeat the davening. The Gemara that you do is talking about Chayla Moyed. Chayla Moyed is no different Shacharis Mincha Maariv. But Rosh Chodesh is different because Ein Bekatchen HaChodesh Balayla. And as we discussed a few weeks ago, both nights you don't repeat the Shemoneh Esrei. So this is a sort of a shtickle of a kula, but it's misleading because people might think that you see Yaleh V'Yavo on Maariv is not so important. It's wrong. We just learned the whole sugya of making an achraza between Gula Tefillah because some might forget. I saw the Chavadas and Aleph Ayin Zayin. He was asked by a Fruma. He was middle of the end of Maariv, and they're about to say Yehei Shmei Rabbah. And he made a calculation. If he skips Yaleh V'Yavo, he'll be able to get to the end of Shemoneh Esrei, say Yulei Ratzain, and he could answer Yehei Shmei Rabbah. And his cheshbon was Yaleh V'Yavo is not ma'akev, so I'll skip it. But I get Yehei Shmei Rabbah is the mitzvah the Reis of Kedusha. So Yechavadas said, don't be so frum, you don't be krum, you daven with Yaleh V'Yavo. If you miss Yehei Shmei Rabbah, so you're honest. The point is, it's not an extra credit. It happens to be, it's not ma'akev b'diavad. Question. What happens if by Maariv he said, HaMachzir Shechinto Lציון, and he paused. Oh, I forgot to say Yaleh V'Yavo. His location is in between the word Tzion and Modim. So this is interesting, because mitzad echad he finished the bracha of Avodah. Mitzad sheni he didn't start Hoidah. His location is in between. What's the halacha? So this is a famous sugya, which is important to mention, other nafkaminas. The same shayla is up to Beis Yosef in Siman Kuf Yudalid is L'gabi Mashiv HaRuach. If someone left a Mashiv HaRuach, he has to daven over. If he remembered Baruch before the end, go back to Mashiv HaRuach. Let's say he said Mechaya Mason, stand on the brake. Now what should I do? He finished Mechaya Mason, but didn't start the Chodesh. So this is a machlokes gedoyle rishonim, a maracha mul marach in Kuf Yudalid. If you could put it in there. Mitzad echad, you didn't start the next bracha, so it's good. Mitzad sheni, you finished that bracha. So you're in no man's land. So the poskim say that we rely on the sheet, you're allowed to put it in right then and there. So it's a little funny. He said Mechaya Mason, Mashiv HaRuach Moed Geshem, and not the Chodesh. But that's better than going back and repeating the bracha. And this, the Shulchan Aruch is Mekel and Kuf Yudalet, Sivav. You're allowed to put it bein bracha lebracha. Zokta Mishtebrua. If that happened on Rosh Chodesh and you remembered that you didn't see Yaleh V'Yavo in between Tzion and Modim, the same applies. Say Yaleh V'Yavo right then and there. It's a little interesting. He said there were Machshel at Tzion, Yaleh V'Yavo, and then Modim. Oh. Now the question is the same question if it happened by Maariv. I'm davening Maariv, I said Shinasei L'Tzion, I realized I left it Yaleh V'Yavo, what do I do? Should I put it in Yaleh V'Yavo right then and there and then say Modim? So we would say, until today, why not? Same thing, right? What's the difference? However, the poskim say that since Maariv, Yaleh V'Yavo is not ma'akev, so you're running a risk. By putting it in where it doesn't belong, it might be a hefsek in the Shemoneh Esrei. And more so, it might be Yaleh V'Yavo levatola, because you're not really allowed to put it there. We put it there by Shacharis and Mincha and by Mashiv HaRuach. We have no choice. Otherwise, you have to repeat a bracha. But by Maariv, it's a bit negotiable. And therefore, Zokta Mishtebrua and Kuf Yudalad Lamed Beis, that something that's not ma'akiv, you left it out, go weiter. You said the word Tzion, to put in Yaleh V'Yavo, you're risking two problems. It's a hefsek in Shemoneh Esrei, and maybe Yaleh V'Yavo is levatola. Now you're probably wondering, Yaleh V'Yavo levatola, there's not a bracha, but the Ramah in Kuf Peiches Siv Zayin says you can't stick Yaleh V'Yavo in middle and benching in middle of a rachamon, because it's a bracha levatola. Frag the Magen Avram, why bracha levatola? Well, it's a nice tefillah with Shem Hashem. Zog the big day Yesha. But if it's said in the context of a bracha, it's said as a Yaleh v'Yavai. If it's not necessary, it's a bracha levatala. So this is why the Mishnah Berurah says, you're allowed to stick in Mashiv Ruach in between Tzion and Modim. You're allowed to stick in, in between Chaimesim at the Chodesh. You're allowed to stick in Yaleh v'Yavai in between Tzion and Modim. But that's only when it's Ma'akiv. If it's not Ma'akiv, then we say, go weiter. And he adds two other interesting examples. Let's say a person forgot to say Atachayin Antonu on Matzoi Shabbos. So if he didn't finish the bracha, he could say it. Let's say he said, he finished the bracha, he didn't start the next bracha. So we'd say, oh, so stick an Atachayin Antonu there. So Mr. Berurah, no. Since Atachayin Antonu is not Ma'akiv, if you have a kois, then don't add a bein bracha lebracha. And the third example, with something that's not Ma'akiv, you don't add, is Al Anisim of any tefillah in Chanukah or Purim. It's never Ma'akiv, so if you remember to say it, wonderful. If you forgot, don't stick it bein bracha lebracha. And this, the Atachayin Antonu, is halach in Shulchan Aruch Reish Sadik Daled, Sif Daled. Now, the Poskim add an interesting sensitivity that if someone is nafshay aguma alav, he taka forgot Yaleh v'Yavai by Maariv. He remembered after Tzion before Modim, but he's so ois mensch about the siman loy toiv. He won't be able to daven Shemona Esrei. So then he could rely on a Radvaz in Chelik Aleph, Tov Kuf Samach Aleph, where the Radvaz goes with the Rishonim that you're allowed to put Yaleh v'Yavai in between Tzion and Modim, even by Maariv. Even though, as the Birkei Yosef and Kuf Peiches Zayin points out, the Radvaz quoted one Rishon, and there are so many Rishonim that say now to put it in. So ideally, we don't put it in between bracha and bracha. But if someone is ois mensch, and he won't have a good davening or a good Rosh Chodesh, so if it pacifies his worries, you're allowed to put it in main bracha lebracha. Question. Someone said by Maariv, he forgot Yaleh v'Yavai, and then he thought, oh, I didn't see Yaleh v'Yavai. So we'll soon see that Lamaisa, even by Shacharis, is a problem. What do you want to do? So we'll soon get back to that. But by Maariv, there's no shaila about it. You don't say Tilim Ula Maariv. So what do? Baruch Atah Hashem, Machshin Asel Tzion, and go weiter. Verfallen. Again, Nafshi Aguma Olav would be better to put in Yaleh v'Yavai after Tzion, but not to say Lamdeinu Chukech. So Rabbi, as you see, when you forget to say Yaleh v'Yavai, it's not Pashut. It's a lot more simple, halt cup, and don't forget. This is all Maariv. Basically, Maariv is not Ma'akiv, but it's not extra credit. By all means, it's not extra credit. The next question is Shacharis and Mincha, which is really one. Or, of course, Yaleh v'Yavai in Chol HaMoed. So this is clear. If you're holding by Avodah, so go back and say Yaleh v'Yavai. Once you started Haidah, you started Modim, and Mr. Berurah spells it out in Kuf Yudal Chav Ches, even one word, even Modim, or in Mechayim Eisim, Ata Chodesh, even Ata, one word is you're holding an Haidah, it's too late. Actually, the Lashon HaGemara is like that. You remember the Haidah. Haidah is even the first word. In other words, you're allowed to put it in between. But once you start the next bracha, now what do you do when you start the next bracha? Go back to Ritzei. Well, soon Zalman said if he went back to Yaleh v'Yavai and said Tzechazena, but didn't say Ritzei, he wasn't Yaitza. Because the entire Avoid the Ritzei bracha was puzzled. It was missing Yaleh v'Yavai. Now, the next question is, by Shacharis or Mincha, or by Chol HaMoed, you said, Baruch Atah Hashem, and then you chapt. Should you conclude Amach Shenasa L'Tzion, or should you say, Lamdeinu Chukecha? So the emphasis is, Lamdeinu Chukecha is far from a simple Eitzah, because you're not supposed to say Tilim Ula Shemona Esrei, but then again, what else are you going to do? Zok the Mishnah Berurah in Kuf Yudal Sivkot Lamed Beis and more barichas in the Bir Halacha there, he says, what else are you going to do? You can say Hamachzir Shechinaso Lציון, and then put Yaleh Veyavo in between the two brachas. We just learned that it's not so posh to do that. Some Rishonim, well, you can't put it in bracha lebracha. So the Mishnah Berurah has had such a problem with putting it in bracha lebracha, he recommended better say Lamdeinu Chukecha and go back and say it like a mensch. In other words, he was so reluctant to put it in bracha lebracha. And Mishnah Berurah makes it a point in Kuf Peiches Chav Beis and Tav Chav Beis Hey to say the same chiddush. Better say Lamdeinu Chukecha, but don't put it in bracha lebracha. Now, the truth is, Mishnah Berurah is based on a Ritva in Tainis Gimel. The Chayodam in Chavdal Ches quotes the Ritva, that the Ritva sanctions such an Eitzah. If you said Baruch Atah Hashem, you want to do it right, say Lamdeinu Chukecha, you're holding nowhere, and go back and say Yaleh Veyavo. Rav Moshe in a Tshuva Chelik Daled Sadik Gimel, it was shocked. He says, T'mua ma'oich lamuvan klal. How do you go lechatchila and say Tillim L'Shmein Esra? Lamdeinu Chukecha is not a bracha of Atala, that's true. But it's not a bracha for Shmein Esra. So, pardon me for using the word, but that's the truth. It's a question of lesser of two evils. Mishnah Berurah holds to put it in bracha lebracha is worse. So he said, Lamdeinu Chukecha. Moshe says, what do you mean? Lamdeinu Chukecha? And I must mention, the Magen Avraham and Kuf Lamed Hey Siv Katan Ches has the following shayla. Nothing to do with benching. There was no kohen in shul, so they called up Yisrael. And just then the kohen walked in, so he told the Yisrael, move to the side, we'll give the kohen, and you'll get shlishi. Let's say the Yisrael began, Baruch Atah Hashem, said Baruch Atah Hashem, and the kohen walked in. So up to Magen Avraham and Siv Katan Ches, don't say Lamdeinu Chukecha. The kohen is here. Too bad, he came late. He's not Kehanim's reasoning, he's not a kohen. But you can't say Lamdeinu Chukecha. Why? Because it's not a perfect Eitzah. Don't forget, in the best scenario, you're saying Baruch Atah Hashem L'Shem Bracha and converting it into a pasuk Tillim. That also might be a Hashem Shemaim L'Vatala. So it's far from a perfect Eitzah. So here's the question that I leave for you to decide. Mishnah Berurah in 3 places and many poskim say the same based on a Ritva. Lamdeinu Chukecha. Rav Moshe and the Shulchan Shloim, Rav Shloim Amira in Tav Chav Beis doesn't make even a shayla. He says, you said Baruch Atah Hashem, say Ma'ach Shechinaso Lציון, and you say Yaleh Veyavo, right then and there. Now what do? To me it seems that most poskim, and the Heintige poskim as well, all say that we follow Mishnah Berurah because he has a Ritva on his side. The Hilchos Chag B'Chag has a very nice Einfall. He says, really the whole bracha of it say is to bring back avoida, v'sein chalkeinu b'soyer asecha. In Golus, we have no Torah. So he says, maybe the Lamdeinu Chukecha is not a hefsek in that bracha. Lamdeinu Chukecha means teach me Torah. So maybe it's a little less out of place. But whatever the case is, I'll just tell you that Lamdeinu Chukecha is not a simple eitzah. But it seems that's the right thing to do when you're holding in that situation. But let me just show you how careful you have to be before you paskin a shayla. The Tila David and Reish Sadik Dalet Sif Katan Zayin says, if someone said Baruch Atah by Matzoi Shabbos, Baruch Atah Hashem, he didn't say Chayin and Adas, and he thought, I didn't say Atah Chayin Antanu. Should he quickly say Lamdeinu Chukecha and go back Atah Chayin Antanu? So the Tila David, no. Why? Because not Ma'akiv. But the next Sif Katan he says, but let's say the person has no wine for Abdullah. So then the Atah Chayin Antanu is Ma'akiv. Then he should say Lamdeinu Chukecha and go back and say Atah Chayin Antanu. But to me it was even more gishmak. The Mishnah Berurah and Reish Sadik Dal Tiv Katan Zayin has the same shayla. Someone said Baruch Atah Hashem on Matzoi Shabbos. He should not say Lamdeinu Chukecha. He should say Chayin and Adas and gave Aita. Mishnah Berurah, you hold Lamdeinu Chukecha is a good Eitzah. Teretz is a good Eitzah when you have no choice. But Rosh Chodesh Maariv, Atah Chayin Antanu, and Alanisim, you do have a choice. So we see, all agree, Lamdeinu Chukecha is far from perfect. If you have no choice, you do it. The question is, what does it mean have no choice in the context of Baruch Atah Hashem of davening? Now, if someone said Baruch Atah Hashem HaMachzir or more, then it's too late. Then you say Shechinase Lציון, and you say Yaleh Veyavo between bracha and bracha. The Mishnah Berurah in Kuf Yud Dalet Sivkot Lamed Aleph quotes a chiddush of the Levush that let's say you will be putting it bein bracha lebracha, so be careful to say Yaleh Veyavo toich kedei dibur of the words Tzion. The Levush holds it's ma'akiv because once it's toich kedei dibur with Shechinase Lציon, it becomes more of a bracha. Now l'maaseh the Taz is doichet, but lechatchila you do it right. Once he started the next bracha, even the word Modim, some say even the mem of Modim, but he started, then it's fafal and it's too late because he started it and then you can't put it in. Then what do? We follow Shulchan Aruch, Tav Chav Beis Aleph. Once you're maschel Modim, choiza l'ritzei. And again I stress, please remember, when you go back, you don't go back to Yaleh Veyavo. Once started Modim, you go back to ritzei. Halicha Shloimeh Tezvav Hey says if you went back to Yaleh Veyavo, you did not repeat Ritzei and finish Shemona Esrei, start again from the beginning. 19 brachas you repeat. You know why? Because you forgot the bracha of Ritzei. If someone davened all Shemona Esrei left Elam Mashinim, he's not Yoitza. So, don't go back to Yaleh Veyavo, go back to Ritzei and say it carefully. This is klar. The next question, what I realize is important to mention, is if someone remembered at the end of Shemona Esrei, so the Shulchan Aruch says, Niska Baida, go back to the Avoida, Im Sayim, Choiza L'Rosh. Now, it's too late to add it. You have to go back to the beginning. What does it mean, Sayim? The Shemona Esrei used to end Basholeh. 19 brachas. Then we added Hiratzain, we have Elokei Netsar, we have personal tefillos. So to make a very long story short, based on the Gemara with Shulchan Aruch, Tav Chav Beis Aleph, when you finished your tefillos, your tachnunim, if you daven a lot, so zayin azay. But if you still plan on saying tachnunim at the end, you didn't finish. So where you're holding? Middle of Sim Shalom. What do you go back to? Ritzei. When you finish your tachnunim, even though you didn't make gimel psiyas backwards, but you finish davening, then you finish davening. It's not totally in gimel psiyas. It's totally in finishing your tachnunim. If you say yiratzayin, elokei netsar, a second yiratzayin, so until the second yiratzayin, you're holding Shemona Esrei. You go back to ritzei. That's the consensus of the poskim. But let me be very clear. The gimel psiyas in this context is not ma'akiv. Of course, the nafkamina would be. No. So here we're going to say, make sure you know what you're doing, because the difference going back to ritzei, which is 3 brachas, or going back to the beginning, which is repeating 16 extra brachas. If you're still holding any place at the end, you go back to ritzei and trim your losses. Question, true story. The Shalom Eshiv in Kama, Chele Gimel, Siman Kuf Samach Tes, Tebedavi Uvda. He was holding the end of Shemona Esrei, forgot Yaleh Veyavo, he was honest, and they're about to say Kedusha. I guess they didn't wait for him, whatever the story is, they're about to say Kedusha. So he declared, what should I do? If I quickly say Yuleh Ratzain, then I can answer Kedusha. Because after Yuleh Ratzain, you're allowed to answer Kedusha. But then, if I ended Shemona Esrei, after Kedusha, I'm going to have to go back and start from beginning. So his cheshbon was, I'd rather not have to repeat the whole Shemona Esrei. So he decided to listen to the Shatzei Kedusha and B'yot Shmei Ka'ina, but not say Yuleh Ratzain and Kedusha, because then he's going to have to repeat the whole Shemona Esrei. Now, this is a big chiddush. Although the Shevet HaLevi in Chele Gimel Yod Aleph and Hey, the end of Chav Gimel quotes it, I saw the Pischei Tshuva in Kuf Chav Beis says, if you say Yuleh Ratzain, so you're ending your Shemona Esrei. So how could you go back to Ritzei? But for us, it's hard to accept. Why is it a stira? Yuleh Ratzain means you're holding at the end. It's enough at the end, you're allowed to put in Kedusha. But since the Sholem Eshev Vade was going to say afterwards Alekai Ntzor, and probably a second Yileh Ratzon like many people do, so why is it Muchach that he's ending Shemona Esrei? Now he must have held, if I'm saying Yileh Ratzon to be able to say Kedusha, he used the lashon of Hesach Hadas. The Pischei Tshuva Iselin uses mamash that lashon. You want to end the Shemona Esrei, so make up your mind. You want to end, you want to be in the middle of it. But the later Paiskim are really matmi on this psak. Rav Moshe Chele Gimel, Simon Nun Vav, Halicha Shloima, Rosh Chodesh Aleph Gimel, Emek Bracha, Arif Abramchik, all say, why is it a stira? You're holding in Tachnunim, but you didn't finish Tachnunim. So to me it seems that Lamaisa, maybe even the Sholem Eshev was only worried about because you want to make an official ending. But if me and you are holding in the middle of a kind of tzar, that's what we're holding. And we hear the shot saying Kedusha, say Kedusha. And then go back to Tachnunim. When you finish Tachnunim, or whatever, you don't have to say Tachnunim, go back to Yaleh Ritzei. But there's no reason to say it's an automatic Hesach Hadas. Question. True story. Someone asked this me a few years ago. He forgot Yaleh V'Yavai, and he's holding in the middle of Modim. So he tried to be creative. He said, listen, if after Modim you're allowed to put an Alanisim, so what's wrong with putting in Yaleh V'Yavai? B'kitza, he finished Modim. Before he started V'Al Kulam, he added Yaleh V'Yavai. In other words, he said the full Yaleh V'Yavai, Shalei B'Mekaymai, was a Yaitza. Someone asked me once, I thought it was even funnier, he put Yaleh V'Yavai in Alekai Ntzor. Now that has a little bit more meaning than in Haidah, because Alekai Ntzor is open to any tefillah. So he put it in a tefillah. Which tefillah? Yaleh V'Yavai. So the question is very serious. He already finished davening. Do you have to repeat the entire Shemona Esrei again? Maybe with the Eved, wherever you put it is good. So to understand this, we have to hear a different question, a shayla nifla ma'od. Someone was davening Rosh Chodesh Shacharis, for example, and he realized Rosh Chodesh is a day that's very mesugel for tefillah. So he, in his own words, like many Yidden do, Ada Yom Hazeh, he said, Rebbeinu Shalom, today's Rosh Chodesh, it's a big Yom Tiv. Help me, help my panos, help my child, help me get a shidduch. He said a tefillah using the words Rosh Chodesh. He was so busy with himself, not Rosh Chodesh, he forgot Yaleh V'Yavai when he got the Yaleh V'Yavai. So he finished Shemona Esrei. He said Rosh Chodesh in Shema Koleinu, not Yaleh V'Yavai, but a Zechira, and he forgot Yaleh V'Yavai. So there's a Sefer Pardes LaRashi, which is written by Rashi, but at the end there are tshuvas that were written in the year Tov Ayim Beis. So you're talking about a few hundred years ago. And from one of the Chacham of that Zman, and there they have this Shaila, and he paskined that since you made a Zechira of Rosh Chodesh, it's enough, b'diavad. Now, I want to add, the word Zechira is a pretty good word. What would you think if someone that on Shabbos, okay, Shabbos Echal B'Yom Tiv, or better yet, let's say someone on our Shabbos davened a weekday Shemona Esrei, but he mentioned Shabbos at one point, weekday Shemona Esrei, but he mentioned Shabbos. So this is the Mechaben Shulchan Aruch Reish Samaches Siv Dalid, that once you had some Zechira, he was Yaitza. So maybe we'll say that's the pshat in this Chiddush. He mentioned Rosh Chodesh, and indeed the Chidah in Birkei Yosef quotes this psak from this earliest Shita, and he says basically once there was a Zechira, he would be Yaitza. This Birkei Yosef Tav Chav Beis Sif Katan Dalid, Reb Chaim Falaji, Reb Chaim Soifa, the Yavitz in the Siddur, Shalmei Tzibur, many other Svardish Paiskim, all accept this as normative halacha. Now, the question is this muskim l'chol hadayis? Because where did he put it? At the end of the day, where did he put the Zechira? In Shema Koleinu. We learned the Gemara, where does Yaleh V'Yavai go? In Avodah. Now, that we could deal with. Because L'maisa Shema Koleinu is open for anything. Right? You're allowed to put any tefillah. The Gemara says it in Avodah Zarah, Daf Zayin. That's Paskin and Kuf Yutes and Shulchan Aruch. So I must tell you, to make a long story short, regarding this question, when he said a Zechira in Yaleh Veyavo, it's probably a machlokes in the middle of Shema Keleinu. It's a machlokes maracha mul maracha. But I did see enough poskim to say that b'diavad, if you really mention Rosh Chodesh in Shema Keleinu, don't repeat b'diavad. In fact, I saw the Cyrus Tshuva, that's an Enikol Echsam Seifa, in Chele Gimel Tov Kuv Dalet. Now, how this story happened is beyond me. But the Shatz said Yaleh Veyavo in Shema Keleinu. Now, where was the Olam? I guess any place but where they're supposed to be. But the Shatz said Yaleh Veyavo in Shema Keleinu, and he didn't say it in the right place. So he said he was Mekel, based on this Ramah and the Shulchan Aruch Reish Samachez Dalet, as long as you made Askara. Oh. Now, Lamaisa, that is a Chiddush, but at least we could say some hold b'diavad yoytzim. But here the question is, when you put Yaleh Veyavo in Hoidah, after Modim, Tainet D'Maima Mordechai, in Tov Chav Beis Gimel, he quotes the Chidah, he says, you can't say that. The Gemara says, if you remember that you didn't see Yaleh Veyavo in Hoidah, what do? Go back to Avodah. Gemara doesn't say go say it in Hoidah, because Tefillah belongs in Avodah. How do you put Yaleh Veyavo in Hoidah? And he has a raya, because regarding benching, you can't put Yaleh Veyavo in the wrong place. You have to say Al Nisim and Hoidah, and benching Yaleh Veyavo in Ritzei. And he says, the Chidah, Neira Yair, I guess they were contemporaries. The Chidah quotes it, I don't know why. But what I found beautiful, the Pischei Tshuva, that's Iselin, Tav Chav Beis, has a tain in the floor. He says, yeah, you're allowed to put Haskaras in Milah Shema Keleinu, right? In fact, you left out the same Talamat Levracha, you're allowed to put it into Shemay Nestra. But you can't put Mashiv Ruach that you forgot in Shema Keleinu. What's the chiluk? Teretz the big chiluk. Shema Talamat Levracha is a tefillah. That belongs in Shema Keleinu b'diavad. But Mashiv Ruach is an askara. What do we see? It has to be in the right place. So here we see that even putting Yaleh Veyavo in Shema Keleinu doesn't work. So how could you say you put it into Hoidah? And finally, the Chachma Shloim, Rav Shloim Kluger, on the page, in Tav Chav Beis, he says, you can't put anything except what Chazal said. You have to put Yaleh Veyavo in Ritzei. Nothing else. Now we ask the big question that we're probably wondering. What do you mean nothing else? We paskin you're allowed to put Yaleh Veyavo in between Tzion and Modim. Says, that's better. Why? Because if you didn't start the next bracha, you're in Ritzei. But any other place, you can't do it. So Rabbi say, as you see, like I told you, and I'll tell you again, it's much easier to remember. But if someone forgot to say it, and someone put it in the middle of Hoidah, it's very hard to be Saimach, even with the Eved. The Gemara said, go back to Ritzei, and he put it in Hoidah. I found a host of poskim that if you put it in Hoidah, it's probably wrong, even with the Eved. Rab Chatzkel Erot in the Tshuvas Chelik Aleph Siman Gimel, he says it with all Tmimis. The Gemara says, put it in, go back to Ritzei. What are you putting in Hoidah? Rav Vosner Chelik Teskuf Mem Zayin, he says some people are Mekel, but you go and connect it a Gemara. So the Maisa, we're going to say, like most poskim, if you said it in Shema Keleinu, no, hechrashti. But the Eved, you could be saying on it, al safik brachas. You said it in Hoidah or beyond that, avad, it's no good. And no doubt about it, putting in a kain Ntzor doesn't work. Mitzarecha, kain Ntzor is open for tefillas, but it's not Shemay Nestra. It's zichanat avoida. So you have to put it where it really, truly belongs. Next shaila, which happens all the time, but it's interesting how a chiddush makes such a tumult in the paiskin. Someone davened Shacharis, forgot about Yaleh Veyavo. Forgot that he forgot even. Okay. After he finished Mussaf, I guess then he realized it's Rosh Chodesh. And he says, oh yeah, I didn't see Yaleh Veyavo in Shacharis. Now the question is, does he have to daven over Shacharis? Now let me be clear. Paiskim were very concerned about people that have nervin. I'm not sure. So if you woke up as man muflag that you have a suffix, then just ignore it. I'm not talking about a suffix. I'm talking about someone that's a vadai. He has no nervin. He definitely did not say Yaleh Veyavo in Shacharis. So now he's holding after Mussaf. So me and you would say, so what? You missed Shacharis. Well, how does Mussaf help for Shacharis? And indeed, there's no mention of this, not in Gemara, not in Rishonim. To my knowledge, the first that discusses this is the Ramam Mipanu in Siman Chafei, the Tshuva Chamishi. You see, he has 10 Tshuvas there. But he writes, Ilav de Mistapina, I would say that when do you have to go back and daven over if you left out Yaleh Veyavo, if you didn't daven Mussaf? But once you daven Mussaf and you made the Askara in Mussaf, that would make up for your missing Yaleh Veyavo in Shacharis, and don't repeat the Shacharis. Where do I get such a chiddush? Mussaf helps for Shacharis. So he has what be'einav is 2 rayas. Actually, he says it very briefly. He says, let's say a Shatz davened Chazar Shatz of Shacharis, and he left the Yaleh Veyavo, and no one realized until the end. Now, how things happen, I stopped asking a long time ago. But no one chapped till after he didn't say Yaleh Veyavo in Chazar Shatz. So he wasn't Yaitza. The Rosh says, Kimish Le'ispal Dami, right? Zok de Mechaba in Kuf Chavav. Don't repeat the Chazar Shatz. We'll soon say Mussaf, rely on the Mussaf. That's one chiddush. Another chiddush in Kuf Chavav is, it's Siv Gimel and Dalet. Let's say the Shatz in the Shtilish Shmeinesser of his, Shacharis, left at Yaleh Veyavo. So then he could rely on the Hoiche Kedusha, the Hoiche Shmeinesser. So the Ramam Mipanu, Oy Bazo, you see, you're relying on what you're doing later. So who had in our case? Now, the truth is, it's a chiddush. First of all, it's a chiddush because it's not in Shulchan Aruch. But Lamaisa, the Knesset Gdoila, who lived a little after the Ramam Mipanu, he says, the Ramam Mipanu says it apologetically, like Mr. Pina. But I'm telling you, he's right. Halacha Lamaisa, if you daven Mussaf, you're yaitzu with that. And the Magen Avraham and Kuf Chavav Sif Cotton Gimel quotes both Ramam Mipanu and Knesset Gdoila. So according to that, if you daven Mussaf, then you realize you didn't daven Shacharis bevadoyis, you do not repeat the Shmeinesra. Now, probably Ramam Mipanu held, like the other side of the Chakira, that really you daven Shacharis. Novos, you didn't say an Askara. No, Mussaf is your Askara. Lamaisa, Gedoli Achrayim, besides Knesset Gedolah, Magen Avraham, El Yerabba, Pri Megadim, Rav, Chayodam, Derech HaChaim, Aruch HaShulchan, Yeshuas Yaakov, Gedoli Achrayim Mamish, all quote this Ramam Mipanu. Lamaisa, it's a pliya to understand. Hago ba'atzmecha. If someone left out Mashiv HaRuach Shacharis, can you be Saimach HaMussaf? You need both, not one. Haskar, you need both. Also, the Rai is from a Shliach Tziba Shetoah, is Bechlal Shver Rai, is the Baran Kivem and Marketziyah, in Kuf Chavav. That's because of Tircha de Tzibura. Who said a Yachid could rely on that Kula of Mussaf? But the real problem, Zok the Chidah, this is interesting, the Chidah and Berkei Yosef, Paskins like Ramam Mipanu. But he has Shiurei Bracha that he later added in Kuf Ches. He says, I saw a tshuva from the Rashba. Now this is tricky. Our Rashba is expanded 7 volumes, doesn't have this tshuva. Where did I find it printed? In the Araisa, they put out a Rashba on Brachas, Fechte Brachas, 2 volumes rather, and they have the Kutei Tshuvas from the Rashba. And I looked at the tshuva. The Rashba, and Daf Chafei, in that Araisa Rashba, has a Shaila. Someone daven Shacharis and daven Mussaf, and before Mincha, he realized he left that Yaleh Veyavo of Shacharis. But he realized that after he davened Mincha. So he davened Shacharis without Yaleh Veyavo, he davened Mussaf and Mincha. Does he have to daven over for the Shacharis? Maybe it's too late. So the Raj, what do you mean it's too late? It's too late to daven Shacharis, but now we could do it b'toiras tashlumin. It's actually in Rashba. So the Chidah and Shuri Bracha, wait a minute. If you Davened Mussaf, so what if you daven over? So he says, from this Rashba we see the Loika Ramam Panu. And had the Knesset Gdoila seen this Rashba, the Loika Ramam Panu, he wouldn't have passed like Ramam Panu. Had the Ramam Panu seen this, he wouldn't have passed like this. And the Mishnah Berurah in Tav Chav Beis, Sif Cotton Beis, quotes the Shuri Bracha that the Rashba is the deciding factor. Now this is tricky when you have a Rashba that the Magen Ram didn't see, Knesset Gdoila didn't see, Ramam Panu didn't see. But Lamaisa, what's interesting is that the Mishnah Berurah says, Lamaisa, we have to daven over, and he throws in a monkey wrench, you daven over, but Teres Nadava. In other words, since Ramam Panu said you don't have to daven over, so we'll daven over Teres Nadava. Now that sounds like a benign statement, but it's not. Because we know the Chayodam and Chav Zayin Yud Zayin, based on a Machab at the end of Kuv Zayin, that Bisman Hazeh, we don't daven the Davis. I mean, the Lashon of the Chayodam is a little insulting. He says, we barely have Kavanah the first time. What's the chance you can have Kavanah by Nadava? The Machab says in Kuv Zayin, we don't daven a Dava on Shabbos or Yom Tiv. What would you say if this Shaila happened on Shabbos or Yom Tiv? So the later Achrayim, after Mishnah Berurah, all say, Mishnah Berurah did not hold that you have to daven the Dava. It's just, why not? But let's say you can't daven the Dava, let's say it's Shabbos or Yom Tiv, the Mishnah Berurah is Machriya, the Loika Ramam Panu. Because of this Rashba and this Shuri Bracha, he ignored probably a half a dozen Gedolei Achrayim. So this is a shot you have to call. If someone remembered after Mussaf that he didn't say Yaleh Veyavo and Shacharis, I could list you again more than a half a dozen Gedolei Achrayim that went with the Magen Avram, and Mami Panu you don't daven over. But the Mishnah Berurah, our Paisik, he feels after the Rashba, there's nothing to talk about. Daven over, and when possible, daven the Dava. If it's not possible, daven without the Dava. But let me just show you how not to misunderstand this. The same Mishnah Berurah says that if you were davening Mussaf, without your tefillin, don't forget, on Rosh Chodesh, and you got to Mechaya Meis, you said, oh no, I don't believe it. I forgot Yaleh Veyavo in my Shacharis. He woke up punkden. Don't ask me why. So what should he do? Quickly transform it into a Shacharis without tefillin. Hope tefillin b'tziba, your Shacharis there. Okay, that's a different issue. Then you'll daven Mussaf later. Probably you should find the minion for Mussaf Hashteitzach. But that's how uncomfortable he is with the Eitzah. Also, and this, all the Paiskim say, let's say you remembered before you daven Mussaf that you didn't see Yaleh Veyavo to Shacharis. Don't quickly daven Mussaf. Go back and daven Shacharis. It's only a b'di'eved after Mussaf and kula hai v'ulai. So you see the Eitzah is far from a perfect Eitzah. When a person has to daven over in any case, in any time, La'alochas of the Mechabin Kuf Chav Daled Yud, he could really listen to the shots and not repeat the Shemona Esrei. But there are many Tanayim. First of all, he has to listen from the beginning till the end. The shots has to be saying it slower than Aseres B'nei Haman B'nei Shima Achaz, like happens. If you don't hear it, you can't be Yaitza. You have to bow properly with the tzibur. Don't say B'chu Baruch Shemai. You have to make the Gimel Psiyas Lefanav and La'achrav. B'kitza, it's not simple. The Mishnah Berurah, quoting Bach, Magen Avram, El Yerabba, he says, today we hardly listen. We don't have a very long attention span. You're going to listen from the beginning till the end. Is he going to say every word? He's saying it quickly. It's very not advisable, but it's possible. Now, the only thing I can think of is someone is terribly embarrassed to daven over. He's a Talmud Chacham. He's standing in the front. He's going to daven over. So he thinks, I'd rather listen to the shots. But the emphasis is not going to help. Because you're going to have to make Gimel Psiyas, the fun of Achrav. You're going to have to make Kriyas. So basically, it's not any less embarrassing if he would just daven. Now, another point I wanted to mention, and that is an Isha that forgot Yaleh Veyavo and totally finished Shemona Esrei. Does she have to repeat the Shemona Esrei? So the emphasis is, what's the Shaila? She wasn't Yaitza, could be Shalei Spal Dami. And that's the emes. But I did see a beautiful tshuva from the Mahzir Siman Chav Dalet and Dvarim Mistavra Ma'oid. He says, if this Isha doesn't daven every day religiously, she has children, when she can, she does, but she doesn't daven religiously. Typically, she's saimech on the Magen Avram that a tefillah koldu is enough. So let's look at her Hashayla once again. She davened a beautiful Shemona Esrei, but it's missing Yaleh Veyavo. But you be yaitz in the Magen Avram's tefillah koldu. What are you missing? Haskara. Haskara is a classic Zman Grama. So she's patur. If she davened religiously Shacharis and Mincha, so without Haskara, she didn't daven, she should repeat the Shemona Esrei. But if she davened when she can, but she relies on the Magen Avram, you could rely that you daven Shemona Esrei. The Haskara is Man Grama and your patur. A katan has the same halach like a gadol. Let me be clear. A child that he gil the chinuch and says, "Oh, I didn't daven Yaleh, what should I do?" Don't say, "Don't daven over." That's a bad chinuch. Tell him daven over. Now, if he's not going to daven with kavana, tell him daven with kavana. But you can't mislead a child. Chinuch is guiding, not misleading. What you could do is, if you see he's davening and a davening, don't have to ask him, "Did you say Yaleh Veyavo?" Because he won't want to daven over if he skipped it. So, sheval tasa. But chinuch means if he asks you a question, answer him properly. Question that I began with, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, he definitely said Yaleh Veyavo. He doesn't know if he said Yom Rosh Chodesh there or Chag HaMatzos. So this, the emes is, he got good practice saying Chag HaMatzos for 8 days. But Zokter Shleim Bezalman Alicha Shleim Rosh Chodesh Aleph Ha'ara 12, it's still not a kviyas. A kviyas is 30 days. So he could rely that he said Yaleh Veyavo of Rosh Chodesh. Someone had the shayla, he didn't daven mincha of Rosh Chodesh. Okay, so what does he do? 2 Maarivs. But he was a lamdan. He says, Maariv is already ois Rosh Chodesh. It was like he forgot Thursday afternoon's mincha, like this coming month, and Thursday night is already ois Rosh Chodesh. What am I going to gain if I daven a second mincha? I'm not going to daven a second Maariv. I'm not going to daven Yaleh Veyavo anyhow. And he knew the famous machlokes Tois and Chacham Preventia regarding this shayla, but he made a serious mistake. The machlokes Rishonim was if he davened mincha, but he left out Yaleh Veyavo. So by davening another Maariv, you're not gaining the Yaleh Veyavo. Here, he didn't daven mincha at all. If he didn't have mincha at all, what's the halacha? Tashlumin. He's not going to see Yaleh Veyavo. Okay, but he didn't have a mincha. And that's pashut. Another tricky question, someone missed Maariv or missed Yaleh Veyavo and Maariv. Whatever the case is, he didn't have Maariv that night, Rosh Chodesh. Next morning, what does he do for Shacharis? 2 Shemona Esreis. His mazel, in the second Shemona Esrei, he forgot Yaleh Veyavo. Does he have to repeat the Shemona Esrei or not? So we could say, he didn't have Yaleh Veyavo. But then again, this corresponds to a Maariv, which is not Ma'akev. So the Mishnah Berurah has 2 days, by this very shayla, Kuv Ches Chavav, and he seems to be more Soimech Lahakol, but in Bialacha he quotes a number of Rishonim that holds he wasn't Yaitza. And he concludes the Ovid Kamar Ovid. In other words, it's not simple either way. So as we see, it's much better to halt cup and not forget. But let me leave you with Achra and Chaviv. It's a certain sense in Yana D'Yayim. It's going to be gay in the next 2 months after this coming month. And also, I think, Seif Masa Machshava Tchila. Let's fast forward to Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, which will be on Shabbos. And let's say you make early Shabbos. So you're davening Maariv at 7:30, Maariv of Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh. Do you say Yaleh Veyavo in that Maariv? Now let me put things in perspective. You're davening at 7:30, it's an hour before Shkia. Your neighbor is still working. When he davens Mincha, he's not saying Yaleh Veyavo because it's still erevRoshChodesh. You made Shabbos. You made Tosefes Shabbos. But Zokta Imrei Emes, there's no Tosefes Rosh Chodesh. It's still Vadayim. So how can you say Yaleh Veyavo at 7:30 Friday afternoon? You could make Shabbos al Tosefes Shabbos, but it's not Rosh Chodesh. So he's quoted by the Kajiglov and Eretz Tzvi Siman Chafei and Sechavav that maybe you can't say Yaleh Veyavo. So the Kosher Glava tells him, wait a second, doesn't make sense. Once it's Shabbos, it has to be Rosh Chodesh. I don't know Tesefah Shabbos. He says, yeah, but you can't shpal today. And he brings a Murdik Raya. Had it been true that in such a scenario, you don't see Yaleh V'Yavoy, so why don't we find the Paiskim saying, don't make early Shabbos in such a situation? Because you're going to be denied the opportunity of saying Yaleh V'Yavoy. Is a Raya allowed to say it even though it's Miboy Joim? And Grada, I guess the Imams accept this because in the Michtavim of the Imrei Emes, Michtavei Torah Nun Vav, he taka says that we say Yaleh V'Yavoy. But to me it was a pliya. He's saying don't make early Shabbos because you can't see Yaleh V'Yavoy. Maariv Yaleh V'Yavoy is not Ma'akiv. The Teretz is it's not Ma'akiv, but it's as important. And let me give you a heads up for the next month. Rosh Chodesh Sivan falls on Friday this year. If you make early Shabbos, you're going to be davening 7:30 Friday afternoon. You're going to say Shabbos Shemana. Do you say Yaleh V'Yavoy? It's still 7:30. It's still Miboy Joim. But that would be a tar to the Sasri because Shabbos is not Rosh Chodesh. So make early Shabbos, but don't say Yaleh V'Yavoy. A guten Tag and a guten Chodesh to you all. Amen.
Shem Egen Shir Tel like a big Shacharis to Rav Smith for today's shir. I would love the grace to sponsoring a shir called Egen Shir Tel 718-851-8651. Even though Rav Smith didn't forget anything by the shir, we're still going to do it over and say the Sikkim.
One thing I should stress, the importance of the Yaleh V'Yavoy. It's a very powerful tefillah. It should be said with kavana, hald cup, not to forget. It's part of the avodah, not hoidah. But lamaisa, if someone did forget, it's not a good simon, that's for sure. Make a simon, try to remind yourself something in the siddur. Even by Maariv, as we said, is not extra credit. By Maariv, you try to say it. It's not a good simon if you forgot. But the Eved, he's not repeating the Shemay Nesra. The minig, based on the Rashba, is to actually announce Yaleh V'Yavoy or Rosh Chodesh. Today, it's more often done by a bang or someone saying Yaleh V'Yavoy when he gets there. But clearly, Yaleh V'Yavoy is required Shacharis, Mincha, and Maariv. If someone forgot Yaleh V'Yavoy, could he put it between the word Tzion and Modim? Is a big machlokes in Rishonim. For Shacharis and Mincha, we allow it. For Maariv, that's not Ma'akiv, we advise not to say Yaleh V'Yavoy. Then just go on and Fafalin is Fafalin. Unless Nafshi Agum Olav, then he's allowed to say it, Pasha, to give him his Menuchas HaNefesh. Lamaisa, once you started one word of Moedim, it's too late, and you have to go back to Ritzei, not just Yaleh V'Yavoy. If he said Baruch Atah Hashem, Halacha, he concludes on דיני Chukecha, unless by Maariv he says Shekhinto Lציון, and he just leaves out the Yaleh V'Yavoy. Whenever you put in the Yaleh V'Yavoy between Brach and Brach, we're strongly saying it Toich Kedei. When you have to go back again, go back to Ritzei, not just Yaleh V'Yavoy. The end of Shemona Esrei, you have to go back to the beginning of Shemona Esrei. End means when he finished any and all of his tachnunim, whether it's Elokei Netsar, Yiratzain. It's not totally in taking back 3 steps. Once he finished all of his tefillos, he goes back and he has to add 16 extra brachas, not just from Ritzei, but 19 brachas. He has to start again. In Elokei Netsar, he hears them saying Kedusha. We came out, you're allowed to say Kedusha, and then go back to Ritzei. It's not like you a Mashiach das from the Shemona Esrei and go back to the beginning. You go back to Ritzei. If someone put it in Shema Kerleinu Yaleh Veyavo, it's not advisable. Nu b'di'eved, we could accept it. But if you put it into Haidah or any other place, it's not kosher even b'di'eved. He has to go back, if need be, the entire Shemona Esrei. After Mussaf, he didn't say Veyavo, L'alacha, we daven over, preferably B'Torah's Nadava, but with L'alacha we do daven over because he wasn't yaitzu with the Mussaf that he said. It's only a din and a shatz that we're makel. When someone started Mussaf, and he realized, oh, I didn't say Shacharis, he didn't say Yaleh and Shacharis, so he converts it from Mussaf into Shacharis. Avada, L'alacha, as we said, you could be yaitza by listening to Chazaras Hashatz, but it's a challenge. You have to hear every word and play along as if you're saying it. A shatz that made a mistake never repeats either the his stilla or the haicha, because there's an issue of tircha de tzibura. An isha that always davens religiously and once forgot Yaleh Veyavo could and probably should repeat the Shemona Esrei. If she davens when she has the chance, then you can rely on the Shemona Esrei as a tefillah kolduhu. A cotton should be treated like a gadol, and the chinuch should not be inaccurate. erevRoshChodesh you have a suffix if you said erevRoshChodesh or Chag HaMatzos, you could be Saimach L'Hakol. Tashlumin is even if erevRoshChodesh is over. If you didn't have mincha on erevRoshChodesh, so by night you have to daven Shemona Esrei even without Yaleh Veyavo. If a person davens early Shabbos on Rosh Chodesh, he does say Yaleh Veyavo. If he davens early Shabbos on erevRoshChodesh, then you don't say Yaleh Veyavo, even though really it is Rosh Chodesh. And as we said, the minig is to make early Shabbos because it becomes Rosh Chodesh as well. Yes?
You don't see that.
No.
You don't see
No, yeah.